Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today we're looking at the first volume of Sonic the Hedgehog, the IDW Collection. Because I believe in democracy. Even after this past year somehow. I'm getting off track. My point is, with the third Sonic movie hitting theaters this December, I asked you, my wonderful, beautiful viewers, to tell me if I should cover a Sonic the Hedgehog series or not. And while the no's had a very strong early lead, the yeses won out in the end. So I figured in order to not disrespect the obviously strong feeling that I shouldn't cover this, rather than attempt a full series breakdown, which would be hard to do since the series is still running anyway, let's simply revive the old first volume series to keep this short and sweet. So here's some violins. I'm so fancy. Sonic burst onto the scene with his first self-titled game released in 1991 for the Sega Genesis, and the title would become an instant classic. The game was quickly followed up by a number of sequels, all of which were considered pretty groundbreaking and significant to the development of platforming-style gaming. After the popularity of the Genesis faded, Sega struggled to find ground, as did Sonic. Eventually, he'd make a somewhat rough transition to 3D, but managed to continue pumping out fairly well-received games throughout the years. He would also have his own run in other media, including most recently a popular trilogy of movies, the third one just now out in theaters as I mentioned, various cartoon shows, and most importantly for us, his own comic book. Published by Archie Comics, the Sonic the Hedgehog comic would run for 290 issues and 20 long years, achieving both the longest-running comic series based on a video game and the longest-running franchise-based comic book period. But while the series did finally get cancelled, Sonic's comic rights were almost immediately snatched up by IDW Publishing, the current king of franchise-based comic books. I've already covered a few on this channel, like Ghostbusters, X-Files, and Batman/TMNT, just to give you an example. Not telling you to go watch those videos or anything, I mean, what? By the end of its Archie run, Sonic was being written by Ian Flynn with art by Tracy Yardley, and the both of them have primarily worked exclusively on the Sonic franchise. The end of the series wasn't the end of the road for this dynamic duo though, and IDW would hire the pair to continue their good work on the new series. Almost like the classic comic had never stopped in the first place. Though for this series, Yardley would only be one of a rotating cast of artists that would also include Adam Bryce Thomas, Jennifer Hernandez, and Evan Stanley. This comic would be set after the events of Sonic Forces, one of the most recent games in the Sonic series, and one that Flynn helped write the script for. In that game, Sonic's longtime nemesis, Dr. Eggman, finally managed to defeat Sonic and trap him in space. Without Sonic standing in his way, Eggman took over the entire world, leaving the rest of Sonic's friends, led by Knuckles the Echidna, to form a resistance against Eggman, free Sonic, and save the world again. Which of course they managed to do. They're the heroes, you know? This series would continue from there in short 4-issue story arcs, and the first volume of this series is just those first 4 issues. But in order to prevent the summary portion of this video from being shorter than the intro, I'm actually going to cover the first volume of what's called the IDW Collection releases, which contains the first 3 story arcs that all come together to tell one overarching story. So let's get to that already. Our comic opens on the fact that Eggman has disappeared following the events of Sonic Forces, but his robot army has not, and those robots are showing up to attack random villages. Luckily for this particular village, Sonic the Hedgehog happens to be nearby and he shows up to save the day, which proves even easier once his little buddy, Miles Tails Prower, also puts in an appearance. Once they've cleared out the robots, Tails points out that despite supposedly lacking Eggman's leadership, the robot attacks seem to be growing more coordinated. So Sonic runs off to find more towns under attack, and in the next town he's joined by Amy Rose. Amy first appeared in Sonic CD, but became playable in Sonic Adventure and the very underappreciated Sonic Advance, where she quickly became my favorite character to play as because she hits things with a giant hammer, and I guess I'm kind of into that. Amy is also heavily infatuated with Sonic, which is definitely the most annoying part of her personality, especially since Sonic's only really interested in himself. She tries to convince him to come back to the rebellion so they can figure out what's going on with these attacks, but Sonic refuses and instead heads on to the next town where he runs across Knuckles. This third town has been taken over by a couple Ginyu Force-inspired skunks named Rough and Tumble, who have their own little dance-in poses that they do before fighting. So cute. Knuckles is his completely serious response of, "Watch out, Sonic, they're highly coordinated." Got a legitimate laugh out of me. Rough and Tumble have taken over this town because it makes Wispons, a type of gun introduced in Sonic Forces that is powered by wisps, an alien race that themselves were introduced in Sonic Colors that all have magical powers that Sonic can utilize to solve puzzles. Since Sonic saved the entire Wisp race in that game and became their hero, he's able to call the Wisp out of Rough and Tumble's Wispons, making their guns useless, and allowing Sonic and Knuckles to quickly send the pair packing with their own highly coordinated chant. With that taken care of, Sonic again moves on to the next town, where he runs across a brand new character named Tangle the Lemur, who fights with her extra long and seemingly prehensile tail. Real lemurs don't have prehensile tails, but that's not a criticism or anything, I'm just kind of pointing it out. I mean, real hedgehogs can't run at supersonic speed or hit things with giant pico hammers, no matter how cute it would be if they did, so, you know, I'm down for whatever. Here the pair also meet up with Blaze the Cat, who I think is one of the better post-original Genesis creations. But maybe I just feel that way because she debuted in Sonic Rush, which is an excellent game and maybe my second favorite in the entire series behind only Sonic Generations. Or maybe third after Sonic 2, I mean, that one was a classic. Anyway, Blaze is a princess from another dimension who uses fire powers and uses soul gems similar to the Chaos Gems that can turn Sonic into Super Sonic. Once the newly formed trio has dealt with all the robots attacking the town, Blaze explains that the soul gems sent her here, giving her the impression that some kind of danger awaited them on this plane. Sonic is convinced that she's several months too late, thinking that the real danger has passed since they already defeated Eggman, but Blaze isn't so sure. She decides to stick around until she's certain nothing bad is happening, so Sonic runs off to continue his search for whoever is leading Robotnik's forces now. And we may just get an answer to that, because the first story arc ends with a reveal of Eggman as he menacingly promises to fix a child's little red riding wagon. And actually fix it, apparently? Because our next arc starts with the Chaotix, a group including Espio the Chameleon, Charmy Bee, and Vector the Crocodile, who has the absolutely worst bonus stage in Sonic Generations. Sorry, I'm getting off track again. The Chaotix bring Sonic to a remote village and introduce him to Mr. Tinker, who is Eggman, obviously. But also not, because he doesn't seem to remember anything of his past, no matter how much Sonic questions him on it. His response about the arc having a parabola is an excellent math joke, by the way. Seriously, A+. You made some math teacher somewhere very proud. It seems after his last defeat in Sonic Forces, Eggman wandered into this town and just started fixing things and helping everybody out. And now he even cowers in fear when his own robots come to attack the village. Sonic is initially reluctant to believe it, but he becomes convinced that Eggman really has lost his memories and is now a much nicer person. Just in time for Shadow the Hedgehog and Rouge the Bat to show up. Shadow and Rouge were the Sonic and Knuckles equivalent, respectively, for the villain team in Sonic Adventure 2. Bats are one of my favorite animals, so I've always liked Rouge for that, but not really for anything else. She's a mostly selfish treasure hunter without any real loyalty, and I'm not really sure when she made the transition to working with the heroes, but she has had enough popularity over the years to stick around, for reasons that I imagine have little to do with her being a bat. I don't know what those reasons could be, though. It's a mystery. Shadow is a character I probably don't have to introduce. If you're here, I imagine you know who he is. But just in case, he also has continued to have a lot of popularity following his initial appearance, even getting his own widely panned solo game, but getting some recent big revamps with the Sonic X Shadow Generations game that came out in 2024, and now starring in a major motion picture voiced by Keanu Reeves. So he's a pretty big deal at this point. He's also one of 2 characters I managed to snag a sweet spoon for from Bahama Bucks, along with Amy Rose. Hashtag humblebrag. Anyway, Shadow, having once been duped by Eggman, is not ready for it to happen again, and we have a sweet super speed showdown between Sonic and Shadow as the two race through the town and beyond it, as Sonic attempts to keep Shadow from hurting Mr. Tinker and convince his fellow Hedgehog that everything is okay now. Shadow isn't buying it, of course, and races back to have Mr. Tinker show him what he calls Eggman Land, a secret project Mr. Tinker had let slip he was working on. So Tinker takes him to Eggman Land, revealing it to be an actually cute-looking little theme park he had been building for the kids of the town. With this reveal, even Shadow is willing to admit that this new Mr. Tinker isn't dangerous, and we move on to a sweet Sonic 2 reference as Sonic attacks Eggman's giant flying egg base to see if he can finally determine who is behind all of the attacks. And there he immediately runs into a second Dr. Eggman? Only Sonic knows immediately that it's not actually Dr. Eggman, so the fake gives up the deception and reveals that the true mastermind behind everything is Metal Sonic? Oh, excuse me, Neo Metal Sonic. Metal Sonic, like Amy Rose, first appeared in Sonic CD, and is separate from Mecha Sonic, who appeared in Sonic 2, which is a distinction I still struggle with to this day and will probably have forgotten by next week. Metal Sonic was the primary antagonist of the third fully 3D Sonic game, Sonic Heroes, where he first took the name Neo Metal Sonic. During the events of Sonic Forces, Eggman was apparently working on building Metal Sonic back into Neo Metal Sonic, but the work wasn't completed until after Eggman lost. That didn't stop Metal from taking over Eggman's army, adopting Eggman's look, and trying to complete Eggman's vision of world conquest. Sonic attempts to stop Metal, but since Metal Sonic can absorb Sonic's biodata and gain all of his abilities, Sonic ends up losing the fight and is forced to flee. The Resistance then decides to attack some of Eggman's old bases in the hopes of digging up copies of whatever plan of Eggman's it is that Metal Sonic is using now to try and complete his world conquest. This brings in yet another Sonic character to the mix, Silver the Hedgehog. Silver is from the 2006 game Sonic the Hedgehog, where he came back from a distant future where Eggman had won, in the hopes of stopping him from achieving that very victory. So he's like Bishop, but white. So like, Cable, I guess? And my nerd confession is that I actually haven't played any of the games where Silver was a playable or major character. When Silver returned home after Sonic Forces, he discovered that the future was actually worse than when he left it, so he's returned now to try and prevent that from happening. The duo then run into another brand new character, Whisper. Whisper has a special Wispin, and Silver explains that she was actually secretly around during Forces, always helping from a distance as a sniper, which is why Whisper is a wolf, because she's basically Sniper Wolf, you know, from Metal Gear. The three team up to fight their way through the base's defenses and discover that Metal Sonic's plan has been to go to Angel Island, home of Knuckles, and more importantly, the Master Emerald. It's sort of like the control crystal for all of the Chaos Emeralds. So our final of the 3 little story arcs sees the Resistance, or in other words, basically all the characters we've now met in the story so far, including Rouge apparently, team up to attack Metal Sonic at Angel Island. Most of the Resistance deals with Metal's army, while Sonic and Knuckles go to fight Metal Sonic himself, who uses the power of the Master Emerald to turn himself into Super Metal Sonic. Or would that be Metal Super Sonic? What's the order here? Can I get a ruling on that? You get the idea. Supersized up, Metal easily defeats both Sonic and Knuckles, but Shadow breaks off from the plan to also attack Metal Sonic. This allows Metal Sonic to also absorb Shadow's biodata, and between having that, Sonic's biodata, and the Master Emerald, he's able to transform even further into a giant flying serpent thing. Not sure how that 1 + 1 + 1 equals giant flying serpent, but hey, it's the end boss of like every 3D Sonic game. Hooray! The Master Overlord, as Metal now calls himself, has the Master Emerald on his chest like an exposed heart, and removing it from Angel Island has the effect it always has, causing the floating island to start falling back to Earth. So now the entire Sonic team turns its focus on Master Overlord, with most of the group, especially Sonic, working primarily just to keep Metal's attention on them. While they do that, Knuckles uses the spikes on his knuckles to dig the Master Emerald free. Echidnas are such good diggers. Yes, they are. Lastly, Tails and Vector seize Eggman's flying fortress and crash it into Master Overlord. The combined assault finally proves enough as Knuckles rips the emerald free and returns it back to its proper place, narrowly averting disaster. Metal is defeated and badly damaged, but Sonic for whatever reason decides to let the robot hedgehog go free. Curious what path it'll choose now that it's no longer under Eggman's diabolic control. But that's not the end of the story. In fact, it's just the beginning. Because unbeknownst to Sonic, but known to us, Rough and Tumble kidnapped Mr. Tinker, and with the help of another new character, Dr. Starline, who I'm gonna guess is a platypus judging from that beak. I hope it's a platypus. With Starline's help, they've been attempting to restore Eggman's memories. Unsuccessfully so far, but with Metal returning, something seems to finally click into place in Eggman's brain, and he's right back to his old self, working with Starline to plan for Sonic's demise and promising Rough and Tumble some new weapons so they can also get their revenge on Sonic. But to learn all about that, we would have to go into Volume 2, which would require a different video, obviously. This isn't called Second Volume. Or are you going and reading for yourself? All that's left for us is to race into the breakdown. I'll be honest, I'd never read a Sonic comic before, and while I'm not entirely sure what I was expecting, I guess what I was hoping for was basically this. The story and art just feels so right and familiar to any longtime Sonic fan. The team clearly takes great care to unfold the story a lot like it's just another Sonic the Hedgehog game. I think it would have worked a little bit better if they went about changing scenery a bit more. It does feel like a lot of the comic is spent in the same zone, to use Sonic terminology, but I wouldn't exactly call that a harsh criticism. You're not getting an exceptionally epic story here, but you're not getting just some simple children's cartoon nonsense like, you know, the original cartoon show. What you're getting instead is a perfectly fun and more than competent Sonic story, and I think that's exactly what anyone reading this comic would want. So I'd say my future interest in this series is high. I'd be willing to read more of this series and cover more of it if interest was high enough from you guys. I mean, should I start a second volume series? Is that a thing? I don't know. What do you think? Should I cover more? Let me know in the comments. Also, have you seen the new movie? What did you think of that? Beyond that, be sure to stick around for more New 52 Earth 2 and hopefully some X-Men after that. And dash your way to all the YouTube buttons and hit the like and subscribe so you can help the channel out. And so you can help yourself out to be sure to be here next time, and I hope to see you then, right here in the Comic Cave.